Yeah.
Hi, ladies. Well, thank you for joining today. Heidi and I have known each other for years and years. We worked together at Premier Talent Partners. She was our head of people ops back then. Now she is in a recruiting leadership role at Ginger, which is Headspace, right?
Yeah, Headspace. Now
Headspace. Okay. Headspace. And she and we go way back. We have conversations all the time about TA. One of our conversations, probably a year ago, Heidi, was she was talking to me about, essentially working in a larger company. And when, the people who were the startup people set things up, they're not always set up for scale because the people that come in the early days aren't always thinking about that, and or maybe they don't know how to set things up for scale. At the time, this was really resonating with me because I was at a Series A startup and trying to set everything up and thinking, what the heck am I doing? And how am I going to set things up properly for the people that come after me? And then Natalia, you just started at an early stage company as well. And Heidi, Natalia and I were chatting a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying, oh my gosh, my top concern is scalability and really getting all the operational stuff set up for success for the future. And I said, oh my gosh, you have to talk to Heidi. So we set up this call, and I'm really excited to learn from both of you. This is a topic I'm super interested in. So I thought we'd just open it up. Maybe you could each share just a little bit about yourselves and what you're currently doing. And then Natalia, if you want to kick us off by sharing your current situation, what questions you have, all that good stuff, that would be awesome.
Yes, thank you, Krista. Yes, you couldn't have said it better. I have 15 years of experience in HR and ops and recruiting, and I mostly have been a solo operator, right? So you would think I would be capable of all this, and I am. But at the same time, I realized when I joined a seed stage startup that things are happening so fast, and it's very important what you promise, what you don't promise, how you set things up so that they continue to scale properly. Because in the past, even though I have been able to manage large volumes of work at very fast pace, I realized that I took for granted the fact that systems have already been in place. Even if I had to improve them, they have been in place. So
Yeah.
this is a completely different ball game. I find myself, creating systems, which are super exciting. But then the question that I brought up to you, Krista, is how do I set them up so that 6 months from now, I'm still able to perform it, right? And if I'm not, when do I raise my hand and say, okay, I'm no longer able to manage this volume, right? So this is all new to me. And when you mentioned Heidi, I was all ears and was like, okay, let's talk.
Oh, good. Thank you. That was really helpful. Really quick, what kind of company do you work for now, and what's the current size, like employee headcount?
Sure, good question. So it's a tech startup. We are based out of Palo Alto here in California, and it's a conversational AI startup. So
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
AI, you're in the AI space.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
LLM, AI, NLP, all the hot buzzwords.
Uh-huh.
And we currently have only 11 employees, full-time employees here in
Mhm.
California. We have smaller group of full-time employees in Sydney, Australia, and we have 16 full-time contractors globally.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and we're only 7 months old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's AI. Everything's like newborn. Okay, that's really helpful. And Natalia, are you the only like people ops recruiting? You're like everything, the one
Accounting,
show.
yeah,
Oh
executive
yeah.
assistant, yeah,
Payroll, cleaning
payroll.
the bathroom problem if there's
Luckily, no, luckily we are renting office space at Industrious here in Palo Alto, which is
Oh,
amazing. So
good.
luckily, at least not that, but reserving meeting rooms, yes, that's me.
Okay, okay, all of it, all of it. Oh, wow, you're busy then. But it's still kind of small.
Yeah.
Um, it's still kind of manageable. Okay, that's really helpful. So, like you, Natalia, I have a background, a pretty lengthy background doing HR people ops, operations. I think I started doing HR dedicated work back in 2006. And then I have a whole other, oh, okay. Yeah. And then I have a whole other history before that where I lived and worked in Japan, in a lot of different industries working. I worked there for 7 years and taught English, worked for government like City Hall, and also worked in hospitality. And then my first 3 years coming back to the US, I worked in hospitality, restaurant management, and like private events and that sort of thing. And so a lot of my the way that I do things are very much influenced by hospitality and my experience in Japan, and being, just being very in Japan, the culture is very other oriented and really committed to like taking care of people and creating like really delightful experiences for people. And so fast forward to now, so I've been in a couple head of people type roles. Let's see, there's been actually 4 companies I've done that for. And my last one I kind of like burnt out on. It was a very fast growing tech startup, HR tech startup, and being the head of HR during COVID. And having a very, I think the team that I managed, there was at one point like maybe 10 of us. It was just a lot. And so I kind of wanted to like scale it down a little bit and not manage everything in HR, because everything, like you just described, it's everything, right? And so it's been really nice just focusing on the recruiting part, but having that like that background of the whole HR spectrum, like everything from that involves like the whole entire employee life cycle, has been really helpful and really informed like the way that I do recruiting. So I feel like when you are the first person responsible for hiring people, and you're also probably the first person, like the first HR person, basically you have to not only set up your recruiting systems, you're kind of setting up like your whole people systems. And so you have to start with like the foundational things. So like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like when people are like, we just need a recruiter, and it's like, no, you don't just need a recruiter. I mean, and that's what happens. I think a lot of startups they don't have a lot of money, and so they will just hire a recruiter who's good at recruiting, but maybe not thinking about the whole picture. So so let's go into like whatever, I don't know, questions, or like what's like a pain point that you're having right now, or one specific thing maybe that you're worried about.
Oh, you're Natalia, you're yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
I was in my morning tea drinking mode. Heidi, thank you for that. I was curious, you just described an environment that scaled up quickly, and you had a team that reported to you. So I guess I'd be curious about lessons learned from that. What you would do the same at a new startup versus what things you would very quickly and with confidence say, nope, I'm not going to do it the same way.
Well, I think the last one that I worked for, when I started, I was I was the first people ops hire, and there were 60 employees, and I didn't really know what I was doing back then when it came to like creating, like when it came to like setting up a compensation plan, or I mean, I had an idea, but I don't think I took it as seriously as I should have. So like, and I think I also had a little bit of like imposter syndrome, where I would like rely on what the founders were saying or what our outsourced CFO was saying. And probably I had some ideas, but I didn't have a lot of confidence, but like, I think one of the first things is I didn't have like a built out comp model. So do you have something in place right now where you
That's what it's
salary
interesting.
bands, or
That's one of the first things that I did, because as a recruiter, not very familiar with the space, conversational AI is new. We were
Yeah.
only targeting, for the most part, ex-FANG engineers. So it's like you said, some startups don't have the money. We have the money, we just don't want to spend it, say, on ops necessarily, right? So,
Uh,
and so we want to spend it on engineering talent. And so, I had to know what I'm offering. So the comp structure is one of the first things I put together. But my follow-up question would be to that is it changes quickly, right? Because
gosh. Yeah.
as you interview, you're like, oh, we thought we only go in to hire folks with X number of years of experience because that's our strong requirement. And then, oh, we found someone junior. Oh, they're a great fit, but they don't fit in that comp structure, right? So like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, so we're adding to the comp structure. That's fine, right?
Yeah.
It's going to morph and it's going to evolve. But I guess what I'm concerned about is, yes, I can now amend the comp structure to allow for very junior candidates that we didn't think we would be hiring in the first year. I'd also maybe some of the very highly compensated candidates, but am I being too flexible as an HR leader, right? Or like, do you recommend that we kind of sit down and have a very serious conversation where we say, remember how when I joined you, we discussed we only going to hire this type of talent. Like I don't know where's the line of, okay, I'm just bending too far
Yeah.
versus like I'm being inflexible.
Yeah. So I think like my mistake was bending a little too far, yet knowing that we needed more consistency and structure. Um, so my example would be, first of all, like my mistake in my last company was we had like it was a not a very sophisticated compensation model. It was something that we probably built out from like, do you know, like the option impact survey? It's like a Silicon Valley compensation survey. It was pretty generic. Um, and so we had like a little bit of a structure in place, but then we would get candidates that would come in and ask for a lot more. And I think I wasn't as confident to push back against my hiring managers, especially people like the chief technical officer, or somebody who's kind of like desperate and really they don't know anything really about comp or about equity, like creating like an equitable structure. And they also haven't felt the pain of for example, this is something in my new company that we kind of experienced where we've had different compensation practices over the last like maybe 6 years, and then we had 2 companies merge, and so our comp is all over the place. And it's very, very distracting. The employees are always talking about it. It's always coming up in the surveys. It's always the kind of stuff that we see on Glassdoor reviews, and it's really, really hard to fix. And so that's the kind of stuff where in my last company, I would have kind of like just gone with the flow, like go with the flow and do what the CTO wants to do. And now I'm hoping that I didn't create the same kind of situation that I'm in right now in my current company, where things are like a little too all over the place. So it's more about having a structure, being committed to sticking with it, doing like what you're doing, where you're iterating and you're maybe adding new levels if you need to that weren't there before. And then being committed to like, we're going to live in this for a year, and we are going to look at it at the end of the year and like be committed to doing like a comp review every year, and being committed to like fixing it and like fixing it as you go. But what I would say is so in my last company, it got a little bit like that. And I was there for like 2.5 years. And we started getting that feedback from employees where they're like, the new hires are getting paid so much more than I did when I got hired 6 years ago or whatever. And so my big project on my way out was implementing the pay scale comp system and creating a whole new comp model with levels. And also, I think it was also like geographically based on different geographies. And I worked very closely with the CFO, and we repositioned every single employee in the company. There were like, at that point, 230 people, and put them exactly where we thought they needed to be based on their performance and their OKR achievement and their manager feedback and their 360 feedback and whatever. And we like fixed it all. And now it's like, it's good. Everything feels fair. And almost to the point where I would have felt comfortable like publishing everyone's salary. Here's the band. Here's everyone in the company's salary. Here's the justification of why they are in that band, where they are. And, like I feel really good about that. And that's after seeing how like that just made the employees feel really good.
And
And
that's very impressive, yeah, to achieve the level where you feel so confident you could also go out with it publicly, right, for employees
yeah,
to access. But again, to kind of summarize it then, how and what would you do different, given that you had to spend, I imagine, tremendous amount of time kind of fixing it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
After a while, what would you do different from the beginning?
So this time, if I were like going to start over again, I would spend like a month building out a comp structure before even hiring people. I don't know if I could do that. Or I'd be like, we're gonna have to do some. I don't know. Is that realistic? Is that a crazy thing to?
In my case, it wasn't. No, I kind of joined midstream, right? And basically, like when I joined, the very next day, I was interviewing and making offers, right? So you kind of iterate as you go.
Yeah,
But I still feel that we're early enough in the development where I can really course correct and prevent having to spend a month making things fair. Like I would like to start it earlier and be fair along the way.
yeah. Well, maybe one of the things I might do is push harder to fix things that are not like do like ongoing auditing and fix things as I'm going along. And that was one of the things in my last company that the executive team was amenable to. And we had the budget to be able to do that. The problem in my current company is everyone's willing to audit and look at it, but we don't have the budget to like fix it across the board because there's too many people now. There's over 1,000 people. And so what I wish we would have done is like fixing it as we go, as we're growing. So that might be one thing I would do differently. I would be a lot more disciplined about sticking within the bands, not going above a salary band, like having really good firm guidelines of like we typically pay between the minimum and the mid, or we typically pay at the between the 45th and 65th percentile, or whatever that guideline
Yeah.
is.
Heidi, what is your opinion on index and salaries based on the geo? So like,
I don't know. That is really a hard question, especially you have people in 2 different countries.
no, we have people on 4 continents.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, I definitely, so we did too. We had people in probably 4 continents if I really thought about it. But the cost of living was so completely different between Ukraine and Palo Alto, right? And so I definitely think you have to have some sort of geographic differential or whatever. Um, Within the US, now that everything's remote and the way that the economy is and the way that like cost of living is kind of like everywhere, I honestly, I don't know, but it feels like having a geo, like we call it a geo modifier or a differential. I feel better having that in place. I don't really feel that comfortable paying somebody who I know only has to pay like $1,500 a month for their housing, the same amount as somebody that I know has to pay 5,000. It just,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense.
Right. No, I'm asking because during COVID and immediately after COVID, there was a big movement of saying, look, this is a job, how much is this job worth
Yeah.
to you, right? Because folks were more fluid with their location, and work was done remotely. But we're not there. We are actually a hybrid environment. We're not fully remote. So for us, geo indexing seems to make sense. I was just curious about your experience as well. Krista,
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any questions, because you have really, really awesome experience at a tech startup as well. What were some of your pain points?
Well, one of the things that has stuck in my mind this whole time since my original chat with Heidi was I think she was talking about like the HRIS and like how all the data is, and like now, you know, that once you get bigger, you really like need that reporting and to be very like systematized and all of that. And I believe it was something about like maybe the early people hadn't set up, like they didn't even have like rec numbers for all of the roles or something like that. And she was like, I don't think they realize how many problems like that's creating for us now, because there were no rec numbers. And I was like, oh, like I don't know if I would think of that, right? Do you remember that, Heidi? Was that a thing?
Totally remember it. And it's
Yes.
actually like, I have two buckets that I split things into, like for when it comes to scaling. I think you need to have like your company foundations in place, and then you need to have like your recruiting toolkit. And one of the things that might fall in the recruiting toolkit before you even start recruiting, or as you're going, you need to have all of these things built out. But one of them is like, what are the metrics you're going to track? And don't just do it like, read a blog post and be like, well, we're supposed to, track time to fill and time to hire and the, diversity stats or whatever. But like, what are your executives going to care about? And if they don't care about certain things, like if like time to fill, they don't care. They're just like, we just want it filled. We don't care if it took 26 days or 76 days. I mean, it is what it is,
Yeah.
but like figure out what's important to them, and then make sure that you're setting up your systems in a way, your ATS, and you're training your staff, or if you're a one-person show, that you're being very disciplined, and like maybe even creating your little guide so that when your second person comes on, you're like, this is how I do it. Please do it the same way so that our data spits out the same way. But little basic things like, my team of like 6 people, well, when I joined, there were about 6 people on the recruiting team. Everyone had a different idea of what the hire date meant. Some people thought it was the start date. To me, that's really important because that's when you start paying them. That's where like the money hits, right? But my recruiters were like, no, it's the day that I verbally gave them the offer. And then somebody else is like, no, it's the day that they signed the offer. And we all had different things. And then our numbers were all over the place and nobody cared. And I'm like, why are we even tracking this if we're all like speaking a different language? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so like getting really clear on like, what are the things you're going to track? And then what does each of those things mean? Like literally, what's the glossary of like, what is time to fill? What is start date to you? What is hire date to you? And the cool thing is if you're using an ATS like Greenhouse or Lever or whatever, they have that stuff all built in. So like just follow that great, amazing technology as it's designed. Yeah. What I found is that a lot of our recruiters would use the tool or the ATS as it worked for them, not as it's designed by the professionals, the experts. And then you just get like all this different stuff. And so now we're cleaning up all the data. And that can be said for the HRIS, like really simple, dumb stuff, like how you're naming protocols, like how you save documents or how you do offer letters, and all of it. It all kind of matters when you're trying to automate or take data from one system into another. All of these little tedious things matter a lot. And a lot of times when you're a one-person show and you don't know that much about technology, you don't think until like you have to clean it up, 2 years later, and you're like, oh, okay. So those are some of the like big mistakes that I would not make again.
Yeah, you're reminding me, Heidi, of at Premiere where we worked together, our Google Drive. Like,
oh yeah, Google
Google Drive and how it was set up and how it was just, thrown together, like all people just adding things and adding folders. And I remember, so several things. One thing I remember you taught me, Heidi, was save the document in the folder. Don't just create a document and then have to refile it somewhere else. Like create your structure, like start with the folders, right? Like start with where you want things to go and then go into that folder and create the document so that you already have it organized.
Yeah.
And then I remember our IT guy at the time, he went through this whole cleanup project of our Google Drive that was like, folders need to have, like, if it's someone's name, like an employee's name, it needs to be like more descriptive than that. Like it can't just be their name. It's like their employee file, like employee file name or the employee file. It can't just be a first name. Put the person's last name on there. When you're small, like when you're a 10-person company, there's only one John. When you're a 900-person company, there's 80 Johns. I don't know. Like little things like that you're like, you don't think about in the moment, or like job descriptions. So job descriptions is the main folder, and then you have marketing, customer success, operations, engineering, whatever. But those sub folders need to also say job descriptions. Because if you're just doing a search in Google Drive, and you search for marketing job descriptions, like there's going to be 8 folders that show up with marketing, but you don't know what kind of marketing, like, is it the job descriptions or is it the branding folder or is it the, there's so many marketing employees in folder, right? So you want to be really descriptive about how you're organizing those systems.
Well, because basically Google Drive and Excel or Google Sheets, those are that's actually what like like if you have a software, it started off as like an Excel thing, like I remember when Matt, our COO at Premier, used to always try to explain to me how Salesforce worked. And he's like, Heidi, it's literally like a spreadsheet. Everything in Salesforce is a spreadsheet. And like the way you label everything, it shows up like really pretty as like software and a feature, but really it's all just words and information. And once I kind of understood that, I just started to think a lot more about like, even if it's just me or it's me and Katie or somebody, like a 2-person team, if this company is going to grow, even if it becomes 4 people on this team, I want to build everything so that nothing is in my brain. Everything is easy to understand and find. And so everything that I build or create, I think about it from the perspective of like a product. I'm a product designer. I'm designing a product that other people are going to use. The experience of work, like that podcast that you shared the other day about the experience of work should be like it's a product that people are using, and it needs to be like a product that we can all use, kind of intuitively. And so when people design their processes or systems based on like how they work or whatever their personal preferences, that's really doing a huge disservice to like a team later down the line, because it doesn't make sense like to the masses. It just makes sense to that person's, the way that they organize or whatever. So you just always have to be thinking like, what's this going to be like if 5 people are working in the system? How are they going to think about how we would label this or whatever? And it's kind of dumb and boring, but it's also like, it literally, to me, and I say this to you all the time, Krista, it's the difference between like the efficiency and productivity that you can achieve by setting things up this way literally can help you have like a 4-day work week and, and be like that much more productive, because you're not like creating the conditions where you just always have to be reinventing the wheel, or somebody has to start from scratch over and over and over again. So
I have a follow-up question to that, what you just said about efficiency and automating things. And I don't know, I'm curious how you would answer this question, because you described when you joined the organization, one of the last ones, there were already 6 or 5 people on the team. And my question is more around like all the different things that come as part of the whole cycle, full cycle recruiting, if you
Yeah.
are the only person, right? So like
Yeah.
at a typical early stage startup,
Mhm.
typically there's just one person in the beginning, right? Like that's me currently.
Yeah.
At some point, if we grow and scale, then there might be another person. But while you are the one woman show,
Mhm.
there are all these things that, following up with the candidate, reminding the candidate and the hiring manager that the call is scheduled for today,
Yeah.
reminding them 2 days out that the call is scheduled, then collecting feedback from candidate and from the hiring manager, following up on that feedback. Then, all of these reminders, all of this communication,
Mm.
how did you approach automating it and kind of being more efficient about it so that when there's a lot happening, something is going to fall through the cracks? How did you, what some of maybe tricks you might think of that you used to not let it fall through the cracks, but also to automate it, but at the same time provide a delightful experience, right? Collect the feedback from the parties, remind the parties about the call,
Mm.
check in with them, like if the interview took place a week ago and we're
Yeah.
still interviewing other candidates, to remember to check in with the candidate and keep them engaged. Like there's a lot to
Oh my
do.
gosh, so much. So much. Do you use an ATS?
We do use an ATS that is, again, maybe due to the nature of our early stage, it doesn't come with a lot of bells and whistles. It's not greenhouse,
Okay.
right? So it's capable of, like, I can message candidates like on their cell phones, right? I can email, I can use templates, but it's not going to have automatic reminders going out.
Oh, it doesn't have automatic messaging going out.
And that's a question in itself. Like, instead of hiring a second person, is the money better invested in an ATS that does have automatic reminders? So at least I don't have to do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I almost feel like recruiting, depending on how many roles you're trying to fill, at a certain point, it needs a dedicated person because of what you're describing, because you don't want things to slip through the cracks. You also, though, do want to set things up so that your hiring managers and anyone involved in interviewing, the system is so well set up that you shouldn't have to send them reminders or whatever. Everything's like there for them, ready for them. um yeah, but well, how many roles are you working on? How many
It
headcount?
it depends on the time of the day, you ask.
No, like how
Like not
many
on the day, the time of the day.
how many roles do you have to fill, like, for example, by I don't know, the end of the
Right now I'm working on 5 racks.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot for one person, and doing everything else that you just described. And you probably have a lot of candidates applying.
Yeah, there's no shortage of candidates. Yeah, it's the geographical scale of it. It's also the fact that, yeah, like all the other things, all the other employees and contractors and payroll and invoicing, none of that stops, right? So it's a
Yeah.
lot. And yet I feel that we're still small enough, like you said in the very beginning. Oh, but you're still small enough. It's manageable, right? And I'm like, yes, it is. But,
Yeah.
if I can automate some of these things, it would be great. But I don't know, like, some of the white glove experience, like touch and base with a candidate, like, can you really automate it, right? Like,
You
I
can't.
am talking to FANG engineers, right? Like, I need to make sure they feel confident leaving FANG and coming to an early stage startup. So
Yeah.
that there are some things that even if I could automate, I think I would prefer not to offer the delightful experience. So that's my conversation with Krista, and why I wanted to connect with you. Like, what things do you automate? Which things you just say, okay, there's no way I can be an effective recruiter and a people leader if I also have to do this.
Yeah. I mean, recruiting is one of those jobs. Recruiting and like things like onboarding, if you have a lot of new hires coming on board, you can't you can automate to a certain point, but a lot of it is like to your point, it's how you're making them feel. And a lot of times what I've found is automation can like bite you in the butt because you over automate, then you end up like sending people like kind of cold-hearted messages, like by accident because of the automation.
Exactly. Maybe things have changed since then, right? But the reminders are still going. I'm really, really concerned about that because that has happened in my previous life where, yeah, like that just shakes the confidence of a candidate too.
Oh, so bad. It's like terrible. It's what everyone's, venting about on LinkedIn. So if I were in your situation and I had financial resources, I might bring in a contract recruiter that's really, really good. And have them kind of take this on and just bring them on for like, we need you to fill these 5 roles by this date, but it has to be like somebody really, really good that can have a lot of it is like the selling, right? Because you're a brand new startup. Nobody knows about it yet. So much selling. So there's, Krista, you know how I interviewed for this company recently. I interviewed with this one company that nobody knows about. And a huge part of my interest in that company was created by that recruiter. And this guy I can't tell you how many 1-hour conversations he had with me that none of my recruiters on my team have time to do now, because they have too many roles to fill and whatnot. So I don't know. I feel like it depends on the scale of the role or the how high stakes these 5 roles are for the business meeting their goals. I mean, you can do it, but then it's really, then maybe you need to outsource a little, like the payroll part or something. I don't think you can do it all. I mean, like just listening and like, you're probably working well over 40 hours a week and that sort of thing. Oh, our time, we're probably going to get, 1 minute.
Yeah, let's hop off. I'm sending you another invite right now. And then I wanted to say something too.
Yes.
I'll see you in a bit.